Well, hello there. My name is Walker Stipe, and today I'd like to talk about greedy diversity. We apologize for nothing. Let's start with a quick chat from our good friend Eric Weinstein.
But I believe that it is very important to let the People's Republic of China know that they are not staffing our laboratories anymore, and that we need to look to our own people. And in particular, we are going to get a huge benefit from making sure that women, Black Americans, Latinos are in a position to take over some of these things, because many of these communities have been underutilized. Now, I don't know if that's an insane idea. I want to hear somebody tell me why it's an insane idea. But I believe that part of what we need to do is we need to recognize that there are security issues, there are geopolitical issues with the funding of science, and that what we've done is we've starved our world for innovation. And if we don't get back to the business of innovation, we should be doing diversity and inclusion out of greed rather than guilt. Now, part of the problem with this is that a lot of the energy behind diversity and inclusion is based on guilt and accusation.
Yeah.
And what I want is I want to kick ass. And my hope is that diminishing returns favors mining the communities that have not been traditionally mined in order to extract output from those communities, unless there's a flaw in that plan. If there's a flaw, somebody needs to tell me. If there isn't a flaw, we need to get greedy about innovation rather than guilty about innovation.
That's really brilliantly put. My biggest problem with what I see is it exactly speaks to that in the discussion as diversity. It's used when it's grounded in guilt. It's then used as a hammer to shame people that don't care about diversity enough.
F that shit. Okay? So my point is, I'm excited about the idea of Jimi Hendrix doing quantum field theory. I'm excited about the idea of Art Tatum trying to figure out what the neural nets figured out about protein folding.
Perturbation theory is something a very good friend of mine in the real life mentioned to me as we were discussing things along this line. Perturbation theory is a math/physics thing you can do where it comprises the mathematical methods for finding an approximate solution to a problem by starting from the exact solution of a related, simpler problem. Basically, you can shake your approximator around the function you were trying to approximate and eventually arrive at something that'll do. It'll do, pig. So the key is that you are perturbing. You are shaking stuff. You're trying things out. You're being diverse. Not because you're a good person and you have some sort of guilt or moral high ground, virtue, whatever. You really just want to succeed. And by aiming for that goal, you arrive at diversity. It's a mathematical thing. So we're going to now go over 3 examples of badass humans who are diverse in a particular way. They're females. These 3 gals are all top, 2 of them are top professors and researchers, and one of them is in the process of becoming. She's a student still. So let's chat who they are. So first off, this is Chelsea Finn. She is a researcher, professor at both like Stanford, Berkeley, Google, Facebook. She's everywhere, and she is working on her work that I'm particularly interested in is imagination and robots, which we've gone over that paper, and the general part of artificial general intelligence, aka multitask learning. Details for another time, whatever. So I don't know if you knew, but this past year in 2020, there was a pandemic. And as it just so happened, she didn't care. She gave zero cares in the world. And each of these terribly small, tiny little lines is a research paper that she was involved with. What did you do with your 2020? Because this is what she did. This is Dawn's song. One of the first videos we did, I said we would get back to her, and we will, but her subject is really hard, and there's a lot of things. We will get to her full subject, which is adversarial machine learning, kind of tricking models to think things they shouldn't and all this sort of stuff. And it's really, really difficult stuff. So I'm very one of the reasons we're also talking about these three gals is not just because diversity in these things, but they're also working on some of the most important problems that if we don't figure out, guess what? We all die. So, again, 2020, this is her list of publications in the year where there was a pandemic. I now have an inferiority complex. Thank you. Here is Jordan Herod. She is doing a lot of discussion about AI in general and conversing and communicating with the public. She does not have a massive list of publications. She's currently working on her PhD at, I believe it was MIT. It might have been Harvard. I don't recall. Put it on the screen, Walker. Do it. But one of the reasons I'm trying to have these chats is because I can sort of see the direction in which science is running, or really just progress in like a more general term. And I can see the direction most humans have and are living and believing, and they're not the same. They're not the same. So what happens when two systems diverge and then come to a head? That's called civil war. That's what it's called. So people like this were like, hey, can we let's perturb our discussion. Let's have some meaty chats so that we don't alienate ourselves from each other. So the kind of conversations she's doing, it's like, hey, AI is learning how to cheat. Climate change is a thing. Maybe robots can help. Okay. So this kind of discussion is very important, and people will listen to her. Funnily enough, because she is black and female, and that is a statistically underrepresented, and I don't need to. You get it. You live in the world. So we have a few things we could conclude, right? We could say, oh, I should feel guilty. I should apologize. But we don't apologize for nothing to nobody. And I mean nobody. Extend that as far as your extendo wiener will go. So a typical method to change oneself is to repent and have this massive amount of guilt and blame and all these sorts of emotions, and you're blaming people and all this sort of stuff. And I say, nay, nay. Mr. Eric Weinstein, to quote him, said, fuck that shit. And I would agree and add violence and vehemence to that methodology. It's the reason kind of we're making this video is to say, hey, we're not going to be little cowards. We're going to engage, kill switch, engage. We're going to go further up and further in. It's not a backing down. It's a pressing into. It's realizing, oh, wow, we're missing out on the ability of this massive minefield. Minorities. And in every sense of the word. And we need a way to take the gloves off and say, hey, I don't care who you are, let's talk. That's why I'm swearing so much. The X Prize. There's a new X Prize about carbon capture because, fun fact, climate change is a thing mostly related to carbon, not solely, for another time. But carbon heats up the world. That's not great. So what if we could pull the carbon out of the air? Mwah, muchos gracias. Well, there's an X Prize to chat about more like what to do with that carbon rather than how to grab it out of the air. But a key feature of grabbing oxygen, carbon, not carbon out of oxygen out of the air, that's what we do. Grabbing carbon out of the air is that you need power, in this case, electrical power, but also just power in general. Well, what's a really good source of power? The sun, but not solar. I mean fusion energy. And if we figure that out, energy is like practically free. That is not hyperbole. Like fusion power is actually that insane. And it's literally what the sun does. So if you want a good precedent, how about the literal sun? How about that? So basically you could have a fusion reactor, which would make all the energy you'd ever need to pull all the carbon you'd ever really want out of the air. Climate change, no problem. It's not that hard. Just got to figure out how to make a tiny sun, which we've already done. We just got to get the efficiency up. Tokamaks, other awesome science stuff. And yes, I'm referencing absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's baloney. That's the words of cowards and those who are disengaging. Engage. Converse with God. Okay? If you don't seize power, somebody else will. I think it's Edmund Burke or something like that. If all it takes for evil to win is for a few good men to do nothing. To do nothing is to not seize power. To seize power is doing something, right? That's one of the more fundamental truths, is that power begets more power. The rich get richer. And it's called the positive feedback loop, if anyone's curious. And the way to defeat evil is not to bicker and whine and guilt and all this sort of stuff. It's to mine the unmined minorities, which sounds aggressive and very utilitarian, and I'm okay with that, because it is, if we figure this out, better for everyone. And I mean everyone, the born and the unborn. It's not just our generation. It's not just that simple. It's complicated. So further up, further in, there's a Patreon. You could subscribe, you could like, you could tickle my toes. If I had a foot fetish. Pretty kinky. I don't, so I would probably kick you out of being ticklish. Goodbye.